Well, it seems Nintendo is taking the internet by storm by DMCAing everything that you know about emulators and ROM games. Well, a few weeks ago, emulators disappeared on the Xbox Series X. This is something that really upset a lot of people. Emulation is one way you can play old school games online, and if you look back into the history books of gaming, you have Sony versus Bleem, which was a situation where there was an emulator made and it was deemed as it was not copyright infringement. Well, since 2016, 2018, and beyond, Nintendo has been filing DMCAs and lawsuits against ROM sites, against emulators, getting them taken down wherever they can. They've got their hands in it everywhere. And it seems that Microsoft removing emulation from their consoles is more of just a sidestep and to make sure they don't go at war with Nintendo while they were at war with Sony over their acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Because of that, it's obviously, you can tell just by what I said there, there's a lot of moving parts in the video game world right now between the big three, between Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo. Everything's moving at a different pace. Everyone's placing their piece on the chessboard, but Nintendo is trying to completely take over their part of the market and actually make sure that their part of the market is where it is, where they want it to be. Recently, I did speak about Point Crow. That was a video I did about modding Skyward Sword, or not Skyward Sword, Breath of Wild, with the Legend of Zelda through emulation. They were modding it, and there was many videos that Nintendo actually issued copyright strikes and removed from Point Crow over this situation. And a lot of it was people came out and said, well, he made his money on ad revenue and all this other stuff, but he was also making something that was new. So it comes down to, where would it lie in a court of law? Well, today we really do have an understanding on where these things may lie, and mostly you can't distribute or point to where the distribution of ROMs and emulators can be distributed. If you're going to do it, you got to do it under the radar. You got to completely take it underground, and a lot of people have. Now, I also know some ordinary gamers has spoken out about ROMs and emulation in particular, especially with Nintendo being on the one side of, well, Nintendo can go F themselves. Nintendo is doing what is seen as wrong, because in a lot of cases, these games, a lot of the retro games, you cannot obtain anymore. You can't play them the way you want to. You can't play them on the particular device. But that's where the nuance comes into play. For the longest time, Activision Blizzard, or Blizzard, used to have in BattleNet, you could download the game Rock and Roll Racing as a ROM through the BattleNet through BattleNet itself on their website. You used to be able to download this, no problem. It was stealthily removed a few years ago when Nintendo really did step up against emulation and ROMs, and this is an ongoing pattern at this point of them taking people down.
Let's go. I've been finagling Nintendo in my mouth all the time. Now, to understand, Nintendo's DMCA strike has caused one of my favorite little projects to almost stop. Or I used to pay for something known as Skyline Emulator, which, believe it or not, was the ability for you to emulate Nintendo games on a cell phone.
So why do I go to Mutahar? Mostly because he talks about this quite a bit. And, you know, I've followed along a long way with the Nintendo DMCAs, the ROMs, the emulation, and all of these things, and where the nuances come with ROM and emulation. It really has become this super gray area when it comes to the law, streaming, modding, emulation in particular. You'd never know which way things are going to lie. Well, recently, this is as of yesterday, Dolphin on Steam indefinitely postponed. This was announced a couple weeks ago that Dolphin was going to show up on Steam. This was also on, we believe, on the Nintendo, not the Nintendo, on the Microsoft Series X, and that's why they brought down the emulation on Microsoft. And now Nintendo's actually DMCA striked Steam's version of Dolphin coming out here, or the people that are behind making the Dolphin emulator. Now, these emulations, these ROMs, they're all part and parcel of what Nintendo has been doing for a very long time. There was back in 2016, Nintendo issued a DMCA notice against a really good Metroid 2 fan remake. This was something that caught my eye, and where I kind of picked up the pace with things like this. It was called AMR2. This was a Metroid version. They took the original map from Metroid 1, Super Metroid, and then he made his own type of ROM. They are now making their own unique game that's releasing on Steam later in 2024. And then on top of all of that, there's also been judgments against sites for distributing ROMs. One was, what is this? I believe ROM Universe. It was $2 million award to Nintendo. There was another $12 million done to a couple in California. They had multiple sites that were going out there, and I believe it came down to because they were making money off ad revenue. There was also that one too. That one I can't find in particular, but these are ROM websites where they distribute the games, the copyright of these games, and the emulation of these games. So Nintendo has had a record of doing this since before 2016. This is an ongoing issue, and this is part of the reason why I'm always leery when I have people that come into my chat or during live streams and say, well, why don't you just play this game on ROM? Yeah, you can, but then you run a risk of catching the ire of Nintendo. And this was even at one point where Nintendo used to block people's content for just streaming anything Nintendo related online on YouTube and stuff like that. So with the Nintendo DMCA, they DMCA Valve to block Steam release of the Wii emulator Dolphin. It's a GameCube and Wii emulator that was to be released on Steam. It's been blocked. It's not going to happen. And I can tell you right now, even though they're saying indefinitely postponed, that indefinite means it'll never be coming. It'll never end up on Steam. If you have this emulator, great. Have fun with it. Just know that you don't really want to do much else with it because Nintendo has a record of saying no to these things, and it's really a shame in that sense. Now, part of why they took it down was because apparently the decryption key for the Wii is in the emulator, which makes it very, very difficult because now you're actually distributing something that's considered copyrightable material by Nintendo and by the court system, and that's one of the reasons why this is getting taken down. So it's a real nuance. It sucks to see this up and down stuff with these emulators and these new games and ROMs and people that want to play these games and mod them and just play them for their fans. It really makes it very difficult in that sense because Nintendo's always going to sit there and have their finger on their trigger, and they're very happy to pull it, and that's the issue. Nintendo doesn't look at this as a PR. They look at this as they need to protect their copyright. And in most companies, they do protect their copyright. And this is where it comes down to. Now, ROMs, playing ROMs, distributing ROMs, is it really illegal? That's where it becomes that gray area. It's never been, there isn't enough case law to actually state that it is illegal. It's illegal to distribute them through sites like what we saw with the judgments that Nintendo has. But for you to actually sit there and play them and to emulate, because of the Sony and Bleem lawsuit, that kind of sets the precedent, saying, yes, you can emulate as long as it's not proprietary equipment. So you're doing it on your computer or on a different item, that's where the case law came down. But I can tell you right now, if this continues the way that it looks like it's continuing, there's going to be more than enough case law for ROMs and emulation to get completely kaput. It's going to be completely blown up and gone because Nintendo is willing to pull the trigger here. And so it's kind of a situation where I would say these are warnings to tread carefully with what happens if you're emulating, if you're playing games online, if you're doing stuff with YouTube in particular or Twitch. I like to watch my Link of the Past randomizers. They are a lot of fun to watch, and it's difficult, especially when they do a Link to the Past and Super Metroid crossover randomizer. Those things are absolutely insane to watch some days and to even play at some days. But if this continues, things like that is just going to go bye-bye because Nintendo's just they're now building the case in in the situation to be able to nuke the entire thing. And that is the problem I see with it, and why people, like, I gotta say, some ordinary gamers, your content's great, but you gotta be a little bit careful with it, especially when you sit there and tell people that these things are out there. And I know you put out that video daring Nintendo to take it down. And you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if we see in the near future Nintendo take a firm grasp on their emulations and ROMs. Anyway, I'm your proud Canadian Phoenix, Cindershadow. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I will see you again very soon.